My name is Rachel, and I'm 34 years old. If you told me a week ago that a single phone call would unravel years of emotional progress, I would have laughed. But that's exactly what happened. It was a cool, crisp afternoon in Milltown. I was folding laundry in the living room when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to pick up. Rachel? It's Alyssa, said the voice on the other end. The name made my stomach tighten. I hadn't spoken to Alyssa, my estranged sister, in over 7 years. Her voice still had that familiar tone, polished, formal, and hiding something beneath the surface. Alyssa, I replied slowly, trying to mask my unease. What's going on? I just thought you should know. Grandma Evelyn passed away, she said, her words clipped and almost rehearsed. I assume you're still living your little simple life, but I figured I'd let you know. I'm sure you'll make arrangements. Her words stung like cold air on bare skin. I could practically hear the smirk in her voice. She always knew how to cut deep without raising her tone. Thank you for letting me know, I said calmly. I'll be there. But it wasn't just her words that reopened old wounds. It was everything they brought rushing back. Growing up, Alyssa was the favored one. She was confident, beautiful, and knew how to charm our father, who rarely had kind words for anyone else. I had tried to be the responsible one, the steady, dependable daughter, but somehow that was never enough. The deepest cut came years ago when Alyssa betrayed me in a way that still haunted me. She stole Nathan, my fiancé. He and I were building a life together. I trusted him. I loved him. And then, one day, he was gone, drawn into Alyssa's orbit like so many before him. Since then, I had severed ties. Not just with her, but with my parents too. They chose to stand by her, pretending it wasn't betrayal. Pretending I was overreacting. Now, with this one phone call, the past was clawing its way back into my life. After I hung up, I just stood there in the middle of the living room, holding the phone like it was something toxic. I could hear my daughter humming in the background, completely unaware that the fragile piece we'd built was now trembling at the edges. I took a deep breath and turned back toward the kitchen, where my husband Mark was chopping vegetables for dinner. He looked up and immediately knew something was wrong. Who was it? He asked, setting the knife down. Alyssa, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Grandma Evelyn passed away. He paused, wiping his hands on a dish towel before walking over to me. Are you okay? I don't know, I admitted. It's been so long. Just hearing her voice brought everything back. And of course, she couldn't help herself, had to get in a jab about my modest life. Mark pulled me into a hug. We don't have a modest life. We have a peaceful, happy life. There's a big difference.
He was right.
After the heartbreak with Nathan and the fallout with my family, I had made a choice, a deliberate, difficult choice to start over. I left my job as a corporate project manager and focused on being present for my family. I became a part-time art teacher at a local community center, which gave me time with my daughter and allowed me to finally breathe. Our daughter, Maya, was 6 years old and the purest light in our lives. She loved to draw. Sketchbooks filled our living room. A few months ago, Mark had helped her start a YouTube channel where she posted time-lapse videos of her artwork. To our surprise, it gained a small but loyal following. Maya beamed every time she saw a new comment from someone who loved her drawings. Even though I had found happiness again, Alyssa's call had shaken me. The idea of returning to that house, to those people, brought a sense of dread that I hadn't felt in years. Grandma Evelyn had been the only person in our family who never treated me like a backup option. She was warm, supportive, and firm when she needed to be. She believed in me when no one else did. Losing her felt like losing my last tether to that family. I need to go, I told Mark. Not for them, for Grandma. She deserves that. He nodded. I'll help book the flights. And if it gets to be too much, you call me, okay? I smiled softly. Okay. I didn't know it then, but this trip back to Milltown would do more than test my patience. It would crack everything wide open. 3 days later, I stood in front of the house I had once called home. It looked exactly the same, like time had stopped moving after I left. The pale blue paint, the black iron gate, the overgrown roses near the porch. It all looked like it had been waiting for me. And I hated that it still had the power to make my chest tighten. The wind rustled the trees, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard. I stood there for a moment, just breathing, before finally walking up the path and ringing the doorbell. The door swung open, and there she was, Alyssa. She looked flawless, as always. Perfect hair, perfect nails, perfect dress. Even grief looked curated on her. "Rachel," she said with a polite smile, as if we were distant acquaintances meeting at a brunch. "You made it." "Of course," I said, my voice calm. "I wouldn't miss Grandma's funeral." "Right," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "Well, come in. Everyone's already here." The moment I stepped inside, the scent of lavender and old wood wrapped around me. It was like being pulled back in time. Family photos lined the hallway walls. My childhood self smiled awkwardly in a frame near the stairs. Right below, a perfectly centered photo of Alyssa winning a school award. The house was full, relatives, family, friends, people I hadn't seen in years. Everyone was dressed in quiet shades of mourning, and their polite nods and small smiles didn't hide the tension that lingered in the air like fog. I walked into the living room, and my eyes immediately landed on my parents, Peter and Marion. They were seated together on the couch, murmuring quietly. My father looked up when he noticed me. His expression didn't change. "Rachel," he said flatly. "Dad," I replied, giving a small nod. Marion stood up quickly and came to hug me. "It's good to see you, sweetheart," she said, holding me a little too long. I could tell she meant it, but guilt clung to her voice. I gave her a tight smile. "You too." Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone I had prayed I wouldn't run into. Nathan. He was standing near the window, looking older than I remembered. Tired. As if life hadn't been as kind to him as he'd hoped. He didn't see me yet, or maybe he was just pretending not to. I turned away quickly, focusing instead on a portrait of Grandma Evelyn above the fireplace. Her eyes, soft and full of kindness, met mine. I swallowed hard. I was here for her. Not for the drama. Not for the past. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about saying goodbye. This house held secrets. Unspoken truths. And Alyssa's perfectly measured smile told me she hadn't called just to inform me about the funeral.
She wanted something.
The service began shortly after sunset. Chairs had been arranged in the living room, and everyone gathered as a local pastor, someone I didn't recognize, offered a gentle, respectful eulogy. People nodded solemnly, dabbing their eyes with tissues. I sat in the second row, directly behind my parents, trying to stay composed. I had no intention of crying in front of Alyssa. When it was time for family members to share memories, Alyssa stood up with practiced elegance. "Grandma Evelyn was the soul of this family," she began. "She taught us to be strong, graceful, and fearless. She believed in me when I chose to move to New York to follow my dreams." I blinked. New York? Not Los Angeles? She couldn't even keep her own lies straight. "I'll never forget the times we spent in the kitchen, baking cookies and talking about life," Alyssa continued. "She always told me I was meant for more." That last sentence cut through me like a blade. Meant for more. And yet, she had never told me that. Even though I was the one who sat with Grandma for hours when she was sick. Even though I was the one who called her every Sunday, without fail. The worst part? No one questioned it. They just nodded along, some even smiling like they'd heard that story a dozen times. After Alyssa sat down, there was a brief silence. Then, to my own surprise, I stood up. "I'd like to say something," I said, my voice steady. Every head turned toward me. "Grandma Evelyn was the first person in this family who made me feel seen," I said. "Not for what I achieved or what I could offer, but just for being me." A few people exchanged glances. She didn't hand out her love easily. You had to earn it. And when she gave it, it wasn't loud. It was quiet, gentle, consistent. She didn't play favorites, though some of us might have believed otherwise. I glanced briefly at Alyssa. Her jaw tightened. She taught me that family isn't about appearances or perfection. It's about honesty, kindness, and respect. I sat down, heart pounding. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't explosive. But it was enough. The room stayed quiet for a long moment before the pastor spoke again, gently transitioning back into the service. But I knew something had shifted. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned out and people began leaving, Alyssa approached me in the hallway. Her voice was low, sharp, and sweet like poisoned honey. "You didn't need to make that little speech, Rachel," she said, folding her arms. "This wasn't about competing." "No," I said, matching her tone. "But it was about telling the truth." She gave a tight smile. "You still think you're the better person, don't you?" "No," I replied. "I just don't need to lie to get people to love me." She stared at me for a second, then leaned in, dropping her voice to a whisper. "You have no idea what you're walking into." And just like that, she walked away, her heels clicking down the hallway like punctuation marks.
I didn't sleep that night.
I lay in the guest bedroom, what used to be my childhood room, staring at the cracked ceiling. Every creak of the house felt like a memory trying to claw its way back into the present. Alyssa's words echoed over and over in my mind. "You have no idea what you're walking into." What did she mean? I wanted to believe it was just another of her games, another attempt to get under my skin. But something in her tone, tight, calculated, almost anxious, told me it was more than just provocation. The next morning, I went downstairs to grab coffee and found myself face to face with Nathan. He was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of black coffee, his eyes hollow and sunken. He looked like someone who had aged 10 years in half the time. "Rachel," he said quietly, "didn't expect to run into you. I didn't want a confrontation. Not with him. Not now. Didn't expect to be here," I said flatly, opening the cabinet to grab a mug. He hesitated before speaking again. "I'm sorry. For everything." I turned to face him, mug in hand. "Now you're sorry?" I didn't realize, at least not back then, how badly I'd hurt you. I raised an eyebrow. "You left me for my sister, Nathan. It doesn't get much more obvious than that." He winced and looked down. I was stupid.
Weak.
Alyssa, she knew what to say, how to say it. I thought she loved me. Maybe I wanted to believe someone like her could really love someone like me. There was a bitterness in his voice I hadn't expected, a crack in the mask. "And now?" I asked cautiously. "We're divorced," he said. "She drained me emotionally and financially. She said it was mutual, but that's a lie. She kicked me out last year." I sat across from him, unsure of what to feel. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to ask 1,000 questions. But mostly I felt numb. "That's not all," he said, glancing around like someone might be listening. "She's broke. All that luxury? The stories she tells online? It's smoke and mirrors. She's in debt. She's here because she wants something from the will." I narrowed my eyes. "What?" He leaned closer. "Your grandmother left something behind, something valuable. And Alyssa's banking on being the one to get it. But she's not the only one mentioned in the will." My heart thudded in my chest. "You're saying Grandma left something to me?" Nathan nodded. "I wasn't supposed to know, but I overheard her talking to a lawyer on the phone. She's trying to contest it quietly. She doesn't want you to know until it's too late." Suddenly, it all made sense. The strange call, her veiled comments, the look in her eyes at the funeral. This wasn't about grief. It was about control, about legacy, about money. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the helpless girl who got left behind. I felt like someone who was about to fight back. That same afternoon, I drove straight to the lawyer's office listed in Grandma Evelyn's obituary notice. Her name was Cynthia Wells, and she had been Grandma's estate attorney for years. The office was modest, nestled on the second floor of a brick building downtown, with shelves lined in dusty law books and a small sign on the door that simply read, "Wells and Partners, Family Law and Estate Planning." I didn't have an appointment, but the receptionist must have seen something determined in my face because she let me wait. 15 minutes later, Cynthia stepped out of her office, her graying hair pulled back into a tidy bun, glasses perched low on her nose. "Rachel," she said with quiet warmth. "I was wondering when you'd show up. That caught me off guard." "You were expecting me?" She nodded and gestured for me to come in. Her office smelled like old paper and lavender. "Your grandmother prepared for this." She left behind a very specific set of instructions. I sat down across from her, suddenly feeling the weight of the moment settle in my chest. Cynthia opened a file and pulled out a cream-colored envelope with my name handwritten in Grandma's unmistakable script. She handed it to me gently. "Before I go into the will itself," she said, "you should read what she left for you." I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a single letter. Her words were simple, honest, and so her. "My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, then I've finally left this world behind. I know being part of this family has never been easy for you. I saw your struggle. I saw how hard you tried. And I saw how often you were overlooked. But not by me. You have a good heart, and I want you to know I'm proud of you, not for being perfect, but for being kind, patient, and resilient. I've left you something I hope will give you peace, independence, and a fresh start if you ever need one. With all my love, Grandma Evelyn." Tears welled in my eyes as I carefully folded the letter back into the envelope. Cynthia cleared her throat gently. "Evelyn left you her lake house. It's been in her name for decades, completely paid off. She also left you a financial gift, $80,000 in a trust. For Maya's future," she wrote. She was very clear about that. I blinked, stunned. She never said anything about it. She wanted it to be a surprise. "A way to make up for everything she felt you were denied," Cynthia said kindly. "And yes, Alyssa is contesting it. She claims Evelyn was manipulated. But unless you back down, she's not likely to win. Your grandmother had everything documented, her handwriting, medical evaluations, even video logs. She made sure this was airtight." I felt something rise in me, something I hadn't felt in years.
Strength.
"I'm not backing down," I said firmly. "Not this time." Cynthia smiled and nodded. "I didn't think you would." As I walked out of that office, the autumn wind caught my coat and swept my hair into my face, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking away from a fight. I was walking into one. And this time, I had something worth protecting. I returned to the house with a fire in my chest. Alyssa was seated at the dining table with a glass of white wine in her hand, chatting sweetly with our aunt and two distant cousins. Her laugh, high-pitched and rehearsed, echoed through the room like it always did when she wanted attention. I walked in and looked straight at her. "We need to talk." Her eyes flicked toward me, smile still plastered on. "Not now, Rachel. We have company." "Now," I repeated, voice sharper. "Outside." 5 minutes. A murmur ran through the room as heads turned. Alyssa stood up slowly, the smile vanishing from her face like a candle being snuffed out. We stepped out onto the porch, the cool air pressing between us like glass. "You went to see Cynthia, didn't you?" she said before I could speak. "Yes," I replied. "And I know about the lake house. And the trust. And the letter." Her lips curled. "Of course she'd leave it to you. The pity project. That house should have been mine. I spent more time in it than you ever did." Grandma didn't leave it to whoever spent the most nights in it. She left it to the person who never took her for granted. Alyssa's eyes flared, her usual calm starting to fray. "You don't deserve it. You've always been the weak one, clinging to your boring little family, hiding behind your art projects and pretending you're better than us." "No," I said, stepping forward. "I used to want your approval. Dad's, yours, even Nathan's. But not anymore. You can't stand that I'm happy without you." She said nothing. "I know you're broke, Alyssa," I added, dropping my voice. "I know the lifestyle is fake. The followers, the rented handbags, the apartment with unpaid rent. Nathan told me everything." A flicker of panic broke through her mask. "He had no right. And you had no right to manipulate Grandma's memory for money." Her face turned pale. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, almost whispering, she said, "You think you've won. But this isn't over." "No, it's not," I said. Because I'm not letting you twist what little is left of this family into something ugly again. I turned and walked back inside, leaving her standing there in the cold. By the next morning, word had spread. Alyssa's social media, once filled with curated pictures of designer bags and rooftop brunches, began to unravel. People were commenting, asking questions, pointing out inconsistencies. Screenshots of old, bragging posts were being compared to new ones, and her followers began turning on her. She posted a statement trying to do damage control. But the damage was done. And what shocked me most, it wasn't just strangers who had lost trust in her. It was family. Later that week, Aunt Karen, who had always tiptoed around family conflicts, showed up at my hotel room with a small manila envelope. She told us the lake house was already hers. Karen said with a shake of her head. That grandma had promised it to her in secret. But we've all seen the paperwork now. We know she lied. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside were printed screenshots, comments from Alyssa's social media meltdown, direct messages from former friends, even a forwarded email thread where she had pitched herself to a luxury motherhood brand, pretending to be a single mom in need of sponsorship. The fake image she had worked so hard to maintain was crumbling, and people were documenting every crack. Some of us believed her for too long, Karen added, softly. But not anymore. It wasn't about public shame. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. The quiet, undeniable truth that always rises when lies rot away. Back at the house that evening, my mother pulled me aside. Rachel, she said, voice trembling. I owe you an apology. I waited, cautious. Apologies had been few and far between in this family. I watched what happened all these years, she continued, eyes glossy. I saw Alyssa take what wasn't hers. I saw how you were treated. I let your father dismiss you. And I told myself that keeping the peace was more important than standing up for you. She looked at me, truly looked at me for the first time in years. I was wrong. You didn't deserve that. And your daughter, she's wonderful. I see her joy, and I know that came from you. I nodded slowly. Thank you. That means more than you know. We weren't suddenly whole. One apology doesn't erase a lifetime of imbalance. But it was a start, a step forward instead of another step back. Meanwhile, Alyssa was unraveling. Her online brand partnerships were backing out one by one. A parenting podcast removed her guest episode. Her so-called influencer friends were distancing themselves. And Nathan? He posted a quiet, single-sentence update on his profile that read, "Sometimes we don't lose people, they just finally show who they really are." The comment section was full of support for him. For the first time in her life, Alyssa wasn't the victim. She was the author of her own disaster. And she was standing in the middle of the wreckage with no one to blame but herself. By the time I returned home to Milltown, the autumn leaves had turned fully golden and the air had that soft, smoky scent that comes just before winter. I walked into our real home, and was met with the scent of cinnamon and crayons. Maya was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, coloring a new sketch while Mark sat beside her, reading aloud from a fantasy book. When Maya saw me, she leaped up and ran into my arms. "You're back. Did you see Grandma's house again? Did it smell the same?" I laughed and hugged her tight. "Yes, it did. And guess what? It's ours now. Grandma left it to us." Her eyes widened. "You mean, we can go there anytime?" I nodded. "Whenever we want. It's a place for us now." Mark came over, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. "I'm glad you're back," he said. "We missed you." And just like that, I knew I was finally where I belonged. Not just in this house, but in this chapter of my life. In the weeks that followed, I began sorting through Grandma Evelyn's things at the lake house. She had kept letters, photos, even tiny art supplies from when Maya sent her homemade birthday cards. She had cared deeply, and she had never stopped believing in me. Inspired by her memory, I launched a community project at the local art center. We called it Evelyn Circle, a space for mothers and daughters to heal, reconnect, and create together. Art therapy, storytelling, shared dinners. It was simple but powerful. We received our first round of funding from a local grant. The same week, Maya's YouTube channel hit 50,000 subscribers. One of her videos, a heartfelt time-lapse of her drawing a portrait of Grandma Evelyn, went viral. People commented things like, "I cried watching this. It reminded me of my own grandmother. This little girl is so talented. Thank you for sharing her light. More of this in the world, please." It was more than just views. It was impact. Meanwhile, Alyssa had gone silent. Her social accounts were set to private. Word had it she moved out of state, somewhere quiet, far from the spotlight she once craved. I didn't feel joy in her downfall.
Just peace.
A soft, still peace that comes when you've chosen truth over bitterness. One evening, as I tucked Maya into bed, she looked up at me and said, "I think Grandma Evelyn gave us more than just a house." "What do you mean?" I asked. "She gave us a chance to show people who we really are," she whispered. And she was right. This wasn't the ending of a story. It was the beginning of one we were finally writing on our own terms. Months passed, and the cold gave way to spring. Our lives settled into a rhythm, a quiet one, rich with purpose. The lake house became more than a memory. It became a weekend sanctuary. We filled its walls with laughter, new photos, Maya's artwork, and evening meals on the porch with the stars above. Mark and I grew closer than ever. We didn't talk much about Alyssa anymore.
There was no need to.
Her name belonged to the past. Our focus was on what we were building, a family rooted in love, creativity, and honesty. One sunny morning in April, a letter arrived in the mail. It was handwritten, the script unfamiliar. I opened it slowly. It was from my father, "Rachel, I know I never said it, but I watched you walk through life with more strength than I ever gave you credit for. I've seen the woman you've become, and I realize now I never truly saw you. Alyssa demanded attention. You earned it. I'm sorry I didn't know the difference sooner. If there's still a door open between us, I'd like to try."
Peter.
I sat with the letter for a long time. Not angry, not relieved, just thoughtful. Some doors, I knew, were worth opening. Others were better left closed. I wrote back days later. I didn't promise reconciliation, but I thanked him for his words. For the first time, my voice was being heard on my terms. The Evelyn Circle project grew. More families came. More stories were shared. Women who hadn't spoken to their daughters in years found common ground over paint and tea. One evening, as I stood at the front of the studio helping Maya set up her easel, a mother whispered to me, "You've created something special here." I smiled. It was my grandmother's spirit. "We're just following her light." Maya looked up at me, her fingers smudged with green and pink. "Can we hang my new painting here when it's done?" "Of course," I said, brushing a curl out of her eyes. "It's your space, too." And in that moment, I understood something deeply. We don't escape our past by running from it. We heal by choosing a better future and planting something good where the pain once lived. As Maya dipped her brush into the paint, I looked around the room full of women, daughters, friends, and second chances. This was my legacy. Not what was taken from me, but what I had the courage to build. Thank you for watching this powerful story. If it touched your heart or reminded you of your own journey, please take a moment to leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more real-life inspired stories like this one. Your support helps us keep telling the stories that matter.